Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 17 of what's planned to be 20 episodes of bringing the CT90 back to life. In the previous episode, I finished up the front end, did the top part of it. So the front of the bike is completely done. And if you just look at the front part, it looks like a motorcycle. It's getting there. In this video, I'm planning to do the back part. I'm going to put the swing arm on, the rear shocks, the rear wheel and brakes, the tail light, rear rack, fuel tank, seat, and when I'm done, it'll look like this. And in the next video after this one, I plan to install the engine and hook up all the wiring. So let's go inside and I'll show you the parts that I'm going to be installing in this video. Here are the parts that I'm going to be installing in this video. I'm going to start off with the rear swing arm. This is a brace that connects the swing arm to the brake panel. That's a bolt that holds the swing arm on. And then these two parts are covers for the top shock mount. And we'll put these two shocks on, shock springs, and we mount them with those parts. Okay, next is this license plate frame and tail light. It could be done later, but it's easier to put them on when the wheel is off because you need to get your fingers under there. And same thing with this painted rack. I'm going to put that on now. It could also be done later. Okay, after the rack, then we're going to put on the rear sprocket. Then mount this wheel on the rim. There's a new tire on here. Mount the tire on the rim. You get some new tube, and this part here wraps around the rim, protects the tube from being punctured by the end of the spokes. Okay, that goes on along with the brake parts. All right, then the fuel tank. Actually, before that, what does it matter? But I could put the chrome rack on next. Then the fuel tank. This is a bracket that attaches the fuel tank to the seat. And then I'll put the seat on. Okay, well, let's go outside and start putting these parts on. Here's a swing arm that I'm going to be installing. I cleaned it up some and repainted some of the parts to make it look a little better. None of the red's been repainted. It's all still original. I rubbed it out with rubbing compound at least twice, really hard, and got it shiny. In some places where it's worn all the way through to the paint, it didn't. There's nothing you could do about that. Then I put 2 coats of car wax on it, and it's shiny, looks better, even feels better. I think it's a little bit faded, a little bit more orange than it was when it was new, but not much I can do about that. All right, well, let's start the reassembly. These 2 plastic plugs, they go over these holes. There's one on this side and one on the other side. And a lot of times when I get these bikes, there's a little piece of chain in there. And the chain is for when you switch from the small sprocket in the back to the large sprocket in the back. And a lot of them is missing. There's nothing in them. Okay, this hole here, and there's one on the other side, up here. They're for mounting the passenger foot pegs if you have them. This part here is what you attach the swing arm with, and we'll do that later on. We'll put it on the bike. This brace is for attaching to the brake panel. So when you put the brakes on, the brake part of the brake is stationary, and will stop the bike. You can't really get it on wrong hardly. One hole is larger than the other, and there's one part that looks like there's a washer attached. That will go in, and it goes back here. So first you put the spring on. Then you put this on. And you'll see the larger hole will slide over there. And then we put a washer on. And then this castle nut. And notice there's a hole in here. That's for the cotter pin. There's no lock washers on the on this part here, because as the arm is swinging up and down, we don't want this to be locked up. We want it to be moving. So this part here, we'll put this cotter pin on, and on the other end, it's going to attach to the brake panel. So we're not really ready to put it on now, except I'm going to do it just for safekeeping. So it goes on in this order. This part goes on first. This bolt goes on first. And then there's two flat washers. One of the larger hole goes on first, and the one with the smaller hole, and a nut. And then instead of a cotter pin, they use this piece here. Okay, put them on, and then we get to take them off again later on when we install the brakes. Okay, well, let's go put this on the bike now. All right, well, I greased the shaft up a little bit, and we'll just put it on now. We'll need a couple of 17mm wrenches to tighten it up. Before installing the shocks, we'll install these two covers here over the top shock mount. Secured with these 3 screws, number 3 Phillips head, and number 6 screws with a 10mm nut. These 2 bolts here are for the painted rack that goes on the fender. I'll just put them here for safekeeping. Okay, so I'll put these 2 covers on and then install the shocks. The upper shock mount covers are on, these chrome covers. So now it's time to mount the shocks. And they're both the same. The top part slips over the post sticking out of the frame, and the bottom part goes over a post in the swing arm that we just installed. And to put them on, we'll put this washer and this nut on the left side, and then on the right side, put this washer, then we'll put this nut on, and then it also has a threaded portion at the end, so we can put the muffler on. So then the muffler will be attached with this nut here. And on the bottom, just a washer and a nut, and washer and a nut on this side. I'm not going to take them apart because they're in pretty good condition, and I just made a video for the rear shocks on a 1968 that I'm also working on. So I'm going to insert that video at this point, and then after that video, I'll go ahead and install these shocks. These 2 shock absorbers are from a Honda CT90. You know, the first one's 1967, 1968, and they're also identical to the ones that were on the CT200, which was a CT90's predecessor, which was made for a couple years before the CT90. And what I want to do is I want to clean this rust off of this the best I can. I know it's not going to come off perfectly. And change these covers. They're plastic, and this one's broken. This one's even worse. It's burned by the exhaust. So I need to get these covers off. And at first I didn't know how to do it, so I had to look into it. And I've done it once now, so now I'm an expert. I can make a video. And actually, I just want to share some information that I learned with everybody. But I try to get them apart, and you turn them like this, and they don't want to unscrew. And the problem is, on the end of this, there's a nut. It's inside under this cover. And the tension is really tight. You can't pull it down. So you need to have some kind of a shock compressor. And I'm sure you can buy them, but I wanted to see if I could make one. But what you need is something that'll go over this end here and catch on the plastic here and push down, and because there's a lot of tension on the spring now, so it'll push down the spring and then expose the nut to take off. That's the whole goal right now. So I started looking around the garage here, and I found this part. It's got a hole in the middle of it here, and it fits over this head here, but it won't quite grab onto the plastic. And I actually tried to use it, and it slipped over the plastic and would damage a new one. So this won't work. And here's another part I found. This is part of the starter of the ATC 185, and it has a hole in the bottom here, and it's just the right size. It'll just go over this, well, almost. I had to grind a few spots, the four corners over it, and it'll just slip over now. But that's perfect. It goes over and it catches most all the plastic. So I have part of the compressor built. Well, here's the compressor that I came up with. I built it almost totally with scraps that I found around. Not that many, really. This all thread I didn't have to buy. It was one piece, 3-foot piece. And so I'm into this for $4.02. Oh my. I have two nuts, one on the bottom and one on the top, and a washer. On the bottom here, I dinged up the threads because I don't want this unscrewing by accident. It won't matter when we're doing the compression, but we start to let the compression off. We don't want this to come off and let everything go flying. I mean, if I knew how to weld, I probably would just put a spot of weld on it, but I don't know how to do that. And I made a little hole here in the wood on the bottom for the end of the shock so it won't slip off. And this 2x4 fits nicely into the vise. Oh. Supposed to be another washer on this side. Okay, so let's compress this thing. What we do now is we start screwing these down little by little. And I have a deep socket here. And this was, these two pieces of all thread, it was one 3-foot piece, and I cut it off. Now, if you cut it off a little higher where the socket's not deep enough, well, you could always resort to this type of a wrench. but that'd be really slow. They also have a ratcheting combination wrench, and that'd be a little bit better. This is a through socket where the bowl will go right through it, the all thread, and then there's a ratchet you can put on that, which goes through. But that's not really a whole lot better than the combination ratcheting wrench. Only thing is, you can put an extension on it. Then you can put another deep socket on it, and then the all thread could be, you know, like up this high. So anyway, that's not really part of taking this apart, but I just thought I'd throw it in. Okay, now we're gonna keep tightening this up. We're compressing the spring in there because we want to expose the nut under there. Now, if you look under here, I'm going to move the camera so you can see it better. This part under here, this is really two parts. There's a rod underneath it, that's a third part. And then there's a nut that's threaded onto the rod, and this part is threaded on. So we need to put a wrench on this nut here and put something through this hole here to break them loose, because they're locked together. And that's the next step. All right, I should use a 22mm wrench, but I don't have one, so I have my adjustable metric wrench. And I'll grab onto that nut underneath there and break it loose with a screwdriver. This top part just unscrews. Okay, there's one piece. This will unscrew. This was the bottom. Okay, now we can let the tension off, so we can get this plastic off. Okay, and under the plastic there's a washer, fiber washer or rubber or something, I'm not really sure. Then you pull the spring out, and you notice the spring, the windings are farther apart here than they are on the bottom. So that's the direction it goes in. Then there's this rubber thing. This part comes off now. And then this metal case. And there's a metal collar under here to come out. There's a rubber bushing here, and there's a rubber bushing on the top. They'll come out, but I'm not going to take them off because I'm not changing them. Okay, that's the disassembly. I'm going to reassemble it now. It's essentially just the reverse, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, here are the parts laid out in the order that they're going to go on. And first thing you do is, if you're changing these rubber grommets, there's one here, or bushings, I guess, rubber bushings, and then there's one here. You could do that first. And then there's a collar here. It goes inside this bottom bushing. The top one doesn't have one. It just goes on the frame. Okay, then we put this middle cover on. Then this real thin, I don't know, rubber or whatever it is, some kind of a fiber, probably just for insulation, keep it silent, I'm not sure. That goes in here. Then you want to pull this up if you haven't already done it. It should push down easy and it should come back stiff. That's the shock. I'm sure there's a more precise way to check it, but let's give you an idea that it's working at least somewhat. We'll put this in here. Okay, so then we'll put this rubber part on and it'll go down like this. And you can see the bottom part, it'll fit inside here. So this will go on next. No, they're out of order. This plastic part goes on. No, they are in order. This goes on next. The plastic part goes on next. And now we're ready to compress it. So it'll go on the compressor next. First, this will go under here. Now push it up. I'm unscrewing the bolts of the top to give it a little bit more slack. And then push this bottom part into this hole in the wood. Okay, I need to move the camera now to show the rest of it. Okay, this will be essentially the reverse of this assembly. We want to make sure everything here is centered up before we start tightening it up. This won't necessarily be centered. We can move that over a little bit. So now we can start tightening it up. Mainly you want this hole to be centered over the plastic part. This rod in the middle we can move around. Okay, that should be good. Goes on, this part goes down. Okay, then we lock them together. Then we start loading the compression off little by little, and here's where we can push this rod over to center it, because you want it to go through that hole. Okay, there we are. Back with the one with the chip in it. All right, well, when I get my new ones, I'll have to do this again. Okay, on the shocks, the top can go on either way. It's symmetrical, but you notice on the bottom, it's a little different. This part is kind of like cut out a little bit. Well, this will go in, kind of slips over apart on the swing arm. Okay, so we just put them on. This isn't too tricky. Washer, and this, I think they call them acorn nuts. Same thing on the bottom, except the nut's a little bit smaller. Okay, we'll do the same thing on the other side, except the, the top nut's gonna be a little different. Okay, well that's on now, and as much as I like to put the rear wheel on, I'm gonna go ahead and put the taillight on and that painted rack on first, because there's some bolts and nuts under the fender that are easier to get on before you put the tire on. So next I'll put the rack on, and then the tail light and license plate bracket. All right, well here's the rear rack, and it's going to be installed with these two bolts here. They're on the top, and also this bolt here, lock washer and nut. And the bolts are going to go through from the inside, and the lock washer and nut are going to be on the outside. Okay, put the other one on and tighten it up, and the rack will be on. Well, it's starting to look a little bit more like a motorcycle. Okay, there's been a change of plans. I was going to put all this on in this part of the video right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to install the license plate bracket, this part here, because I need to get underneath the fender for these parts. And the tail light and the rest I'm going to do in the next video with all the electrical stuff. Okay, so this bracket will go on, and bolt to go through the top. There's two of them. They go through these two holes on the top. And then you want to pull the wire through the fender, and it'll go through this hole. Okay, let's find those two wires. Put them through here so we won't be fishing them out later. The only part I see on here, there's a couple thin washers, kind of more like gaskets because they're real thin. Just two of them on here. That's all the parts there are. Okay, so I put a block washer and a nut on the bottom, and the bracket will be on. Here's the parts for the rear sprocket assembly. It consists of these two sprockets. This one here is for riding around town, and this larger one is for off-road use. And they will mount onto this this bracket here. This here, it's a dust cover, I guess. And there's an oil seal in here, and under that is a bearing. And I'm not sure how to take this part off. To tell you the truth, I've never really taken one of these apart. But you can see the bearing under here. And, well, that's this part here. This will mount on the swing arm. And there's a tensioner, chain tensioner. There's two of them actually. This is one with a larger hole, so you can't really mix it up. Because it'll go on here, and then the nut will hold this onto the swing arm. So the first part we mount is this smaller axle. And you notice one side has little grooves around it, and that'll go down like this. And line up those holes. Okay, then this will serve to lock the nuts on. Put this bolt down. And there's these shiny nuts, kind of thin. They'll go on the bottom. Okay, you do one on this side, one on this side, and you fold these tabs up. You know, this is an obsolete part, so I'm just going to fold one of the tabs up because, you know, eventually they're going to break off. So that should hold it. Sprocket's on now, and I did break one of these tabs off, this one here. So I'll have to start looking for a spare. They're obsolete, but you can still run across them once in a while. You can get them used. I'd rather get it new if I can, but they're available. There's a lot of these bikes made. Okay, here's what the back of it looks like. These screws are on there. Bolts are on. It's one tab has been up on each one. And next we'll put this sprocket on. And if you're not planning to use it, it'll go down and mount on here just for safekeeping. The chain will go around this part. And if you're planning to use it, then it'll mount over the sprocket. And the way that's done is you want these bolts here, and you have it has kind of a thin head on it. It's a 10 millimeter M10 bolt, and you put a washer. A washer on it, and then it'll go through the hole, and you put another washer, a lock nut, and a nut. And here's where it's going to go. There's 4 of these little half circles on here, so you just put that on there, and the bolt's going to go through those. I'll show you what's on. The solder sprocket is on now, and it's ready to install on the bike. Here's the rear wheel, and this is the side the brake goes on. And all I really did on this side was I took some emery cloth and shined up the surface where the brake pads will ride on. I shined up the surface where the brake drums will ride on. Shined up the surface where the brake shoes will ride on. And got all the grease and oil off of it. There's an oil seal on this side and there's a bearing underneath it. And on this side, you can see part of the metal. You can see it from the other side too. That's a separator for the two bearings because there's another bearing here. And these are rubber cushions. They're in fair condition. I'm going to go ahead and use them again. And they're stuck in here. There's a couple of tabs down here that hold them on, part of the cushion. Okay, so next let's take a look at the brake panel. Here are the brake parts. And we'll put this part on first, called the brake cam. And this is the part that actually operates the brake, that expands the brake shoes. And it'll go in this hole here. I'll put a little grease on it. This arm will go on next with this bolt here. And it goes on the other side. I put a little mark on here. I don't know if it'll show here. Before I took it off, to line up with this slot here. And sometimes there will be a little mark that the manufacturer put. Might have a little dot on some of these bikes. I've seen them on some of the ATCs. And there might be a dot on here. If not, you can put a little mark on there, before you take it apart, so you get it back in the same position. I mean, you can always adjust it later on, but this will make it easier. All right, now the bolt goes in. It only goes in one side because the other side is threaded. Okay, now the brake shoes. I want to clean this grease off my hands first before I start touching the brake shoes. All right, what I found is, I think the easiest way to put these springs on is I stack these two on top of each other, and then see the springs have a gap on the same side, so I'll put it on here. Over those holes. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side and then bend them over. It's always easy to do it off camera. All right, that one's on, so we get it to stay on. Now that one's on. Let's see if we can get it to stay on. And the other one's on. And then when I bend it over like this, and then I'll bend it over again. Now springs aren't going to fall off. And then I'll put it on the brake panel. And you'll see one is rounded and one is flat. So of course the flat one's going to go on the cam part. I'll put it on here and just muscle it over. That's all there was to it. Okay, well, we can put this on the wheel hub and install the rear wheel and brakes. Now to install the rear sprocket, it's pretty straightforward. There is a flat part on here, so it should line up with the top and the bottom. Chain tensioner, flat washer, lock washer, and nut. Okay, we'll just tighten it up. Later on when we adjust it, we'll have to loosen it up again, but for now we'll just tighten it up because we're not putting the chain on yet. Next we're going to mount the rear tire and brakes, but it's easier to get the rear tire under the fender if we raise it up a little bit. So I'm going to put this 2x4 under the center stand. So that'll raise it up. Actually, it'll raise it up 1.5 inches. 2x4s are 1.5 by 3.5. It's the actual measurement. But that'll be high enough, it'll get it up there. Okay, so here's the rear wheel. And brake panel just slides in here. Now on the other side, we have these dampers, and they're going to slide over this portion of the sprocket assembly. Okay, grease up the axle a little bit, and the chain tensioner is going to go on first. I'm going to put it through here, and then we have the spacer. It has to fit on here. And we also have to get the tire in there. So let me see if I remember how I do this. I think I had to put the tire up first. This is why I raised the bike up, so I can do this. Now there's some brake leakage. I have to keep that on the outside. Okay, now what I want to do is lift the tire up and put it over the part that goes over the dampers. was looking on the other side, watching the, guiding it onto the dampers. All right, now we put the spacer and the axle on. Now I'll screw this nut onto the end of the axle, but not too tight because I have to be able to move the brake panel when I attach that brace. And once the brace is attached, then we can tighten up the nut. So the next step is to attach the brace. And now we're going to secure this brace here to the brake panel. And to do so, we're going to use these parts. And we'll start off with this bolt here, has a hole in it, for this pin. And that'll go in first. And we'll move it, we'll put it in the back here. Kind of thread it through the spokes. These parts are going to be down. Both of these are going to be down. Then the brace goes on that bolt. Then the washer with a larger hole goes on. Washer, the smaller hole, the nut, and this pin that goes through the hole in the nut. And after those parts are secure, then you can tighten up the axle nut because this panel is not going to be rotated anymore. The next step is to hook up this brake linkage, and I had the parts on here just for safekeeping. There's this adjusting nut, brake joint, and spring. Here's the three parts. So we'll put the spring on first. The adjusting nut goes through that brake arm with a hole facing towards the rod. And then we'll put the rod in. You can push the brake pedal down if you need to get it on there. Then you adjust both the left hand brake and the foot brake. They both operate the rear brake. Alright, now we're going to put the gas tank on. And the mounts go through these slotted holes. And these two holes here, they're for the fuel lines. And you put the fuel lines on the bottom of the gas tank, and then the tank will fit all the way down on there. The problem is, the clamps that I normally use, this here, it won't fit through this hole. And this was even smaller. So if you put this on the fuel line and then try to get it all the way down in, it's not going to fit down there. So this kind of clamp's not going to work. This is the type of clamp that Honda originally used. I have a few of these around from that I just saved from bikes I've taken apart. And it goes down just fine. So I guess I could use this. I really wanted to use something new though. I don't know if it still has the tension it had originally or not. But I could use this. Here's a clamp I found. I was thinking about trying it, but it won't quite fit. Thought about bending those ears around, or maybe I could just cut them off. They're not really part of the tension, they're just something to hold on to. Let me try that. Okay, I cut them off. Clamp still works. It's new. And it'll fit through the hole. I think this is what I'm going to go with. Okay, so I'll put these on the bottom of the tank. And I think about 1.5 feet on each one should work. Okay, well I guess this should work. Let me give it a try. Fortunately there's no battery in here, so we can work these hoses around. Oh, it went right down. And there's no engine, so we can reach under here. There's a little hole in the front. Let me show you. This hole here, the two hoses have to come out through that hole. And it's a little bit of a tight fit. I'm going to use these 4 bolts to attach the gas tank. The one that's different will go on the right front, right here. And it's used to attach the muffler. And the gas cap. There is a gasket under here, and they're available if you want to replace yours. Okay, there's a bracket for the seat. There's that part, and this pivot, bolt, and lock washer and nut. So they're going to go on, let's see, like this. And one side is bigger for the bolt to fit through. Then the seat will attach. And there's a couple of suction cups. Isn't that an interesting way to hold it down? Okay, next, if you have a rear rack, we'll put that on. Okay, and here's where we'll end this video. In the next video, I'll put the engine on, but it'll be concentrated mostly on the wiring. And it's starting to look like a motorcycle, isn't it?